Thank you, Vivek. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on board for this conversation. And it's going to be very exciting from multiple angles, not in the least because we're going to explore what it means for India's stack and what it means actually for the government to take the lead on technology architecture. That sort of sets the path for the entire startup ecosystem to follow, right? Some of the things that we have done in India, like Aadhaar, like UPI, like other things, DigiLocker, etc., have now been trailblazing to the extent that a lot of startups have been able to leverage this architecture and infrastructure and create much faster paths to growth and profitability, whilst obviously delivering on the broader purpose of inclusion and creating pathways into the underdeveloped and the underdeveloped, which I think is a fabulous idea. And it's something that's very unique to India. And you are the architect of this, right? So you obviously are the chief product manager and the biometric architect at the Unique Identification Authority of India. And you are, in many senses, the person that has sort of given a lot of this India stack to the nation. So I just thought it'll be a great idea for us to sort of get started. Maybe the first question that I would like to ask you, Vivek, is what is the broad philosophy behind the technology architecture that India is now wanting to put in place?
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the kind introduction, but I'm certainly only a small player in the India stack. There are many people who have been involved in the India stack, but and I think that it does take many people to build the kind of movement that we are doing. So I think that characterizing me as the architect is probably not fair. So therefore, I think that I have had the opportunity to be having a front row seat in many of these exciting things happening. So I will answer in that context. So I think one of the things that we have been we've been thinking about in India is that and I think through a number of things, and many of these things are the understanding evolves over time. So you start from we started in Aadhaar, then things like UPI have happened, and now and each one of these things are actually extending, and there is this whole account aggregator stuff going on in the financial space. There is work in health, and there is work in ONDC. So there's a number of different interesting things. And then there's and something that's close to my heart. We're doing work in Indian languages. So there is a bunch of interesting things that are happening in the public space. And I think that I like to think of it a little bit more in a kind of in a slightly more theoretical way. Is that what we want to create is we want to create for each one of these spaces, we want to create certain open protocols. And these open protocols are things that are rules by which the entire ecosystem plays. And the reason why you want to actually have these open protocols is that you want to and so therefore you can have multiple players come into any different market. And we believe that when there are multiple players coming and doing innovation is when the maximum value comes to the customer and to the country as a whole. And so therefore there are certain fundamental parts which are run as digital public goods, are developed as digital public goods and run as digital public infrastructure. And then the market innovation thrives on top of that to make things to really have exponential innovation. And therefore, many of the areas that we are focusing on is actually to be at the lowest level, the foundational level, right? And to build the things so that, these are things which are obviously important for the government for itself, but also relevant for the market to build on top of that to make I suppose, and I think this is a word that, is to really make life better for all Indians.
Fabulous. So clearly, one of the interesting angles that has always been spoken about is inclusivity and proliferation of all the benefits to everybody across the ecosystem. I think that's something that has sort of been a cornerstone of how the technology stack in India has played out as a public good, right? But quickly, how do you, Vivek, sort of you made an interesting point about how the government leads and we expect the competition and the world to follow in terms of that, right? So where do you sort of draw the line where the government leads and where do you sort of draw the line where, the startups come in?
Yeah. So, and first of all, I mean, I think it's very important that I do not speak for the government.
Of course,
yes, I think that's and I think that I think that many of the things that we have built are actually things in government, right? But we have helped to build. I think that let's put the thing right. The government has built it. We have played a role in building that. But not everything is necessarily, I think sometimes it is also open source efforts, like some of these protocols and things like that are also being developed within the open source. An example is the backend protocol, which is something which is the basis for which ONDC is going to work on. Maybe there are other examples, like a bunch of open source work is happening in the language space as well. So therefore, but at the same time, yes, and definitely, the government plays an important role in providing scale and energy and their kind of backing behind these things, which make it more which actually help to kind of the entire ecosystem comes around it because of the backing of the government in many of these things. So yes, it's important to draw the line, right? So I think the right answer is to think about as there are certain things where we believe that these are utilities, right? Just like in the physical world, you have things like electricity and water and roads and things like that. Those are physical infrastructure. So typically physical infrastructure is run the world over in a kind of a cost plus mode. It's clearly you have to cover the cost of what it is to run the infrastructure, but it is not something where it is not, it's not value pricing in that sense. And so therefore, and I think so therefore, we believe that outcomes for societies may be better if we take at that layer the thing that the base lowest layer things are treated as digital infrastructure, which is an analog to the physical infrastructure, and that's really the what do you call that? And then
the underlying basis.
Are people use to innovate and add value and create a vibrant economy or vibrant ecosystem, right? If you're talking about specific ecosystems there, and.
I love the notion of your thinking about this like a utility. I think it's a great idea. So there will be a certain layer where, because of the underlying public good aspect of it, there will be a utility element to it, like roads, like power, like broadband, for instance. And I think that's something that we are very much able to sort of follow. But I have a question. So one of the things is this utility viewpoint seems to be fairly advanced in India. Right. So we have been able to build this much better than I would say most other countries have been able to. When I go to other countries in general, the viewpoint I get is that the private sector leads in the technology stack and, the government sort of is regulating it or doing stuff there. Right. Here, it seems to be sort of reverse, right? In terms of saying, look, we will take the lead and we'll try and build all these things. And then on top of that, you guys come and innovate. So I think that's something. Where do you think this flip happened? What is the thinking? Obviously, it might include fact that highly intelligent people like you have devoted so much of your time to this as well. So you're a PhD in computer science, you're a BTech from IIT, and obviously you have a lot of experience coming out of this. And when you've got extremely intelligent people sort of coming together under the aegis of somebody like, whatever, Nandan or any other folks in the government being very participatory, you're going to have a very powerful story here as well. But what has been, you think, the kernels that sort of changed the India sort of leapfrogging this world's digital public good ecosystem? Is there a thought process there that you would point to?
So, I think there is always an element of serendipity in all of these things. And I think that, somehow the right, whatever ingredients came together, including people who are willing to spend time, and certainly there are many others beyond me. I want to highlight that. And then there is basically the backing of the government. I think some of those things and some of those things and visionaries who are able to think about some of these things. But having said that, you had in the beginning part of your presentation, your question, you had said that the government takes the lead in building things. Okay. And in reality, we want to take the lead in defining the defining the playground, right? We don't want to necessarily build things. We build things where it is necessary to make the playground a level that makes sense for the market. I am not, at least personally, I mean, I think different view, but personally, I am not of the view that the government should build things. We should ask very, very carefully whether we should build something or not. Because I do think that actually, I mean, as a former entrepreneur, I do think that the private sector is probably the better place to build things. But having said that, there are certain things that even after they are built should be running in a utility form to actually maximize the return and both in terms of and also the inclusivity and the cost and the benefits to people. So that's the point about who runs it, how does it work. Those are the things that matter. I don't necessarily think that building is the job of the government. I personally don't believe that necessarily the focus of the government, but the setting of the rules for the playground and the definition of the interfaces with which people work, right? That I think certainly policy backing to those kinds of things does make a difference. And I think that in India, we've had the good fortune, and I think that's the right word to that this has happened, and the vision of people who have made it happen. I think that, and I think that while I think that there certainly the reason why many people have spent time in helping defining some of these things is because they have seen that the government, and there is actually, by doing these kinds of things, you can make change. And I think part of it is also that success breeds confidence. Once you are actually able to pull some of these things out as an ecosystem and not as an individual, the ability to say, why can't things be better in other domains comes into play.
And the results are stupendous, right? So 1.23 billion people on a biometric authentication ecosystem, about $35 billion of a direct transfer ecosystem, never been replicated anywhere on the planet. The fact that you got such a huge, sort of closing of the gap, right? Just look at the number of accounts that we were able to get enabled. What would have taken 46 years on trend, we've been able to do in 7 years. Those are numbers that are just stupendous, phenomenal numbers that has sort of leapfrogged India into perhaps the most digital nation on the planet right now, right? When we travel nowadays outside, we start to feel, what is happening in that other part of the world? Our stuff works so much easier, so much better, so much faster. These guys are still in, backward froggy land now, right? So I think that's amazing. Let's now switch to the technology part, Vivek. So I wanted to sort of try and understand what are if there are some architectural principles that we use, for instance, the stupendous scale, right, without breaking, right? For instance, using of open source, for instance, using of AI algorithms, right? What is the kind of thinking that pervades the ability to create these platforms as what is the level of sophistication that you guys have in terms of putting these pieces together? Any thoughts on that? How do you architect this storyline to be at such scale and also make it simple enough that it doesn't become too complex? Software, as we know, can become very painful if you don't handle it very carefully. And that, I think, is a very strong unsung, story that we need to sing a little bit more about, how brilliantly these systems work at such scale. I wanted to get your opinion.
No, I mean, I think that, at the highest level, the question, and this is where we've always tried to play an importance, is that spend time on the design, right? So therefore, there is something you can do and say, Okay, and frankly, we do face pressures, right? That something should happen tomorrow, or but I think that spending time, and I think that's something that we have learned, is that spend time on the design, and basically involve all the stakeholders, and do keep things as minimal as possible. I think these are some very simple principles that if you do few things but do it well. Okay, that's the thing. And also try to make sure that your architecture is creating this open protocol which allows multiple players. So think of some of the design of those things, communicate with the stakeholders, and after that, if you design it well, right? I mean, I think that from a technology perspective and all of those things, now, I mean, and I think that and you have to keep moving, right? We started in 2010 with Aadhaar and some of those things. At that stage, smartphone was not was not there in the country at all, right? And today it is pervasive, right? And so there are many of these big trends which have been happening. So therefore, and you need to continuously take the view that you need to upgrade things and understand how better things are happening in the world, and take your strategy to reflect some of the both global technology challenges, global technology trends, as well as specific things on how consumers in the country and how we expect a service to be. Yeah, and I think an example of clearly UPI being easier to pay than in other countries is I think in the end, right? I mean, if we take a focus, one of the things that's always been a challenge in India is the ease of living. It's and this is still true, right? It is more complicated to do things. I mean, expect maybe payments is somewhat of an exception. It's more complicated to do things in India than in other countries. And that's really, for somebody like me, why does it matter if when a day that those things become, as easy to do, right? As easy to do as it is anywhere else in the world, then we've reached it's an empowerment of the citizens and things like that. And to me, those are the kinds of things that if you actually can play a small role to move the needle in some direction, there is what excites me personally.
Fabulous, fabulous. Next question is really around this entire storyline of how exportable this innovation is to the rest of the world. See, we have created something that has been amazing, that has been game-changing for our nation, right? But a lot of it is layered, right? So you got this stack on which you build the stack, on which you build the stack, and they all sort of acting as a whole, giving you the kind of benefits that you want to talk about, right? Yes. Question is really, so if some other nation is looking at us, right? Let's say, I don't know, any nation on the planet, really, what would be in your opinion, one is the exportability of this. Obviously, philosophically, you can export it, but if you were to go about doing it, what would be your advice to those nations saying, agar hame karna hai, how will we do it?
Yeah. So I think firstly, I mean, at a philosophical level, obviously, we've been, I think many people, including the government, have been now talking about the story. And I think it's great because I think it becomes a new way by which, we can say something happened here in India, which is relevant to the rest of the world. So that's very exciting. But I think, and so therefore, conceptually, some of these ideas can, so therefore one way is it's a conceptual way where you handle, and then they take those ideas and they actually, re-implement those ideas for how it is relevant for them and things like that. That's one way. Of course, the second way is to actually, take some of these things and actually provide them as infrastructure, as digital public infrastructure that other people can use. And I think to do that, I think that there needs to be investment. I mean, even from, if we're saying that this is going to be exported, we have to also invest, significantly, because many of the times, as somebody knows, that when you are the first mover in something, you do something, and then after you do it, you realize maybe there's even better ways to do it, right? And technology also moves. So how you actually try and I don't know and I think that how, so so therefore that creation of those vehicles by which we can easily export some of these capabilities is something that should be thought about. Like, I mean, just to give you an example in Aadhaar, right? We built Aadhaar, but in fact, there is now what is known as the modular open source ID project, which is actually an open source effort, which is actually taking the concepts of Aadhaar and has taken it to 7 or 8 other countries. And you know, is becoming one of the, so therefore now it's, so you've actually taken this, you've created a, you know, a second thing, and that takes it forward. Now, is that the right model for anything? That's something to be thought about. But the point is that to really go beyond the conceptual level and the GAN level, you have to actually invest in making these, making these systems directly exportable and usable in other parts of the world. And I think and I also personally believe that, you know, that when, you know, we have done interesting things, you know, in digital public goods, but we have also used things from all over the world to actually, drive both our thinking and technologies. So I think it's always a two-way street. It's not like now we know everything and hum sabko gyan deenge, which at least personally I don't see that at all, right? So therefore I see that it has to be a collaborative discussion where we talk and you know, things improve for people and all over the world.
No, Vivek, in all the time I've known you, your incredible humility is one of your hallmarks. So I don't think you can ever be accused of being even slightly over the top on that front, right? Anyway, right? In terms of how we think about it. Great. So I have a slightly different question. So if I'm a startup, right, and you know, I'm trying to look at these companies and look at the stack that is being built and looking at, you know, what ends up happening. One part really is that I would say that in part, at least, India's stupendous performance on the startup ecosystem, and as a fund, we have also benefited quite significantly from that, is owed really to what we did before, you know, the COVID environment came and the stack was established, right? You know, UPI, you know, that entire, you know, Jan Dhan, you know, the fact that, you know, Jio launched with 3 rupees per GB or 4 rupees per GB. I was a part of that, a minor part of that, but nevertheless, you know, I think, that part, all of those things sort of, you know, work very well to sort of put this in play. Would you say that is something that's going to be auguring well for the future for a lot of countries? You know, I think it seems to me, thanks to what India has been able to do in the last 3-4 years, particularly post-COVID, and show the resilience that has put us way ahead of the other countries in terms of what is happening right now in today's 2022 environment. Do you think that's a replicable model for other countries? I mean, in other words, would you sort of go out and say, ये करना ही चाहिए सभी को, everybody has to do it, it's a great thing, and it has yielded great results with us given what has happened in the country? It builds a startup ecosystem, it creates jobs for entrepreneurs and other guys, it creates an entire parallel ecosystem, which is now Indian startups are actually holding up a much bigger chunk of the national economy as compared to maybe other geographies of an emerging or a similar kind of landscape. Would you sort of, you know, look at it and say this is something that we should do across the board?
See, I'm a believer in this, so therefore, I would definitely say, I think you should definitely look at it very seriously. But I think the question about what is good for any country, that individual countries should decide and understand. But we do believe that this is a very interesting way, and it makes the entire ecosystem better. And of course, I mean, I think I'm very, very bullish on the India story for many reasons, right? I mean, I think that we have this incredible, young population. We have this entrepreneurial spirit, and we just have to set the rules and let the ecosystem really flourish. And that's if we can, rather than, and I think to actually minimize create some good, useful components at the foundational level, and then let the ecosystem build. And we have the market, we have I think it is the next few decades. I think will be great in India, and I think that's something that I do believe strongly in, irrespective of whatever the things we may have built or not built. I think that's and it's because I think we are a young nation, and I think that people are excited about the possibilities, and we have to. And if we just make lives better for for the people in the country will do well. And I think.
Great. One question that keeps emerging is really what's next? What are the new platforms that are being rolled out, right? I think we know about the ONDC, even in Aadhaar. I think when we were at that workshop together, we spoke about the fact that face recognition is coming in a big way, those kinds of things. Do you want to sort of talk a little bit through some of these new, things that are sort of being, sort of articulated or viewpointed or created at this point in time? Is there some kind of a roadmap you can lay out?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll talk specifically about certain things that I am more closely involved with, so that we can talk about. So, one area very clearly is this area of face authentication, which I would like to actually distinguish from face recognition. This is a method by which you are basically cooperatively providing your face to validate your identity. So it's not that's the purpose of face authentication, and we do see that it is a mechanism which may allow many more people to basically take advantage of some of the Aadhaar root of trust to establish their identity for various kinds of business use cases. And I think we're very excited that this has the opportunity of being something that can simplify the business process quite a lot, right? So that's one big thing that is, and then Aadhaar has this, basically this concept of where we want to go towards, of a universal authenticator. Universal authenticator is a device that you hold in your own hand. It's your own device, where you can basically establish your identity. And I think that's the intent, that where authentication, rather than being something on a device that someone else has, is something that you can do on your own device to access various kinds of services. And that's the merging of that with the KYC, etc., is something that we are thinking seriously about in Aadhaar. And so that's something that's one of the exciting things, that is that face authentication, offline KYC, and then combining it with basically a personal device for authentication, that is your own phone to be the authentication device. And that's really the focus of one of the important focuses of where we are going in Aadhaar, right? So that will probably, we want to be able to use it in a manner where in the end it is backed by Aadhaar, but it literally, the right answer really is that, at least my view is, if it's invisible, you don't even know that it is actually Aadhaar that is being used, but that still you're fully able to establish identity for various purposes. And if we actually can achieve that, then that's a way that we are leveraging this identity infrastructure that we've built for the entire country in ways that people can use it much more in their daily lives. So that's I think one important thing that we are focused on, and we hope over the next few months that next month it will be rolled out in a fairly large way.
So let me try and decode these two things. So one, if I look at the face authentication part, right, it seems to me that it's sort of, look, there is technology already there, both iPhones and Android phones, at least at the higher ends, are able to sort of, recognize your face and open up your phone. Correct. So to that extent, that technology exists. What I'm hearing you say is, rather than just depend upon the, fingerprinting or, retinal, reading or whatever else, which might require specialized equipment, use a photography, which is much more ubiquitous, to try and create this as a parallel pathway to doing what you would do earlier. Is that my understanding as well? Okay. So it makes it more ubiquitous, easier, and more pathways to get to success in terms of determining it. That's what it, that's the use case for it, right?
I think that's as far as face authentication is concerned, that is clearly what we are talking about. And the difference is if you look at it, like today you use between using a face authentication to open an iPhone or something like that. The difference is that in the case of the iPhone, you are enrolling yourself into the iPhone and you are matching yourself with the enrolled iPhone. The difference is that when you are trying to do that against the Aadhaar root of trust, it is not you who are saying who you are, it is actually Aadhaar who is saying. So therefore, that is one other important difference, right?
Absolutely.
Even though it may be happening on your phone, okay? It is not that it is happening anywhere else, but it is actually happening on your phone. But the point is that the root of trust is different. And that's where it becomes something that that's different than opening your own, opening the phone with your face. So that's one important thing. The second important concept is the concept that, this is almost 2-3 years ago, Aadhaar launched this offline KYC capability, which allows basically anybody to use the Aadhaar KYC, that is those who may or may not be AUAs, etc., to use the Aadhaar. So as long as the citizen faces that the capability of the citizen to share their KYC with anybody in a form, that was the offline KYC user. Now that has actually been integrated into this this face auth experience on the consumer's own device. Okay, and I think that that combination, that it becomes a personal authentication device, which actually is something that on your phone you can only authenticate yourself, or maybe a few more people who you allow to authenticate on your device. It becomes a personal authentication device, and then it is linked to the KYC becoming available, the offline KYC becoming available. So that's really the difference. In addition to the fact that it is the ubiquity, as you mentioned, is one of the key things, right? That I do not, there are, even the number, you don't need any specialized device to do this.
Got it. What about the second one, the authenticator that you spoke about? Is it like the private key in a public-private key infrastructure? Would that be the sort of equivalent to look at it? Or, can you help us understand the use case there and the ubiquity of that?
I think so. So this is a little bit more long-term in our visions that in the end, we would basically, and we don't know where it would go. And here I'm projecting, we certainly have not committed to doing any such thing. But the point about it, yes, is that we would release a key that basically says that. So you will release a token to somebody else saying that this has been done, right? So therefore, there are two kinds. If I'm doing a KYC, the KYC information is released. If I'm actually just doing an authentication, you will release a token which says that authentication was successfully completed by this person at this time, and they will know that it is, while you don't have to, one of the interesting things is that there are three principles here. One is that you don't have to use the Aadhaar number at all for this. That's interesting. So therefore, there is no Aadhaar number anywhere in this. In this, if you want to, you can. But I'm just saying that you have absolutely choice to do. You absolutely get all the security without the Aadhaar number itself, without ever entering the Aadhaar number in this transaction. The second thing is that it is. The second thing is, obviously this happens locally, so it's happening only on your device. So it's not something that is that goes to the Aadhaar backend or any such thing, which is kind of important. And the third thing is, of course, you will have the ability to record consent. That is, when you have done these kinds of things, and a token, a digitally signed token, would be released, which somebody could use for whatever purpose. You could imagine that, today you do OAuth using Google or something. You could even think of that kind of a thing happening with Aadhaar. Now, that's here I'm projecting. We have not said we would do something,
of course,
but just as a thought process of where things could go, right? So therefore, just to think about what kind of things you would do. So
I think in both the instances, the power of the fact that it's not me saying that I am who I am.
Yes,
but in some senses, the government saying I'm who I am, I think makes it infinitely more powerful and infinitely more, usable in terms of whatever the third party is trying to do. I think that's sort of the gap in.
Key. Yeah, that's one of the goals, which I think exciting things is that to be able to access various services, and then where services could be an apps, could be anything, is through the medium of voice in your own language. Okay, is another big idea and theme that we want to be able to, and I just do believe that we are doing a whole bunch of things in the open source, and we're going to be announcing some things about basically being able to do, and in the end, the question is, what is the user experience? Is it actually good enough to do those things? And I think that we are getting there, and I'm predicting that in the next year, you will see many more things, services being accessible in voice in Indian languages, and in a manner that people say, wow, this is something that actually makes my life easier. So I think that's a prediction. Let me leave it at that.
Fabulous. Can you explore a little bit more on that? See, look, there's a lot of action already happening. You got all these voice platforms, Siri, Alexa, Google, etc., who are doing a bunch of things around this already, right? In terms of what's happening. So, what's the leapfrog that you see here that you think hasn't happened yet?
So in the end, see, the point is that and whether it is the truth, what you have is, as a citizen, as a resident, you have a whole bunch of services that you want to access. They may be, it may be something from as simple as an e-commerce activity to something including, I want to look at my EPF account, or I want to book a train ticket, or I want to do, there are so many millions of transactions that people want to do in a digital form. And today, obviously, all these apps are firstly, they are all, text-based or touch-based, and they're all English, right? Predominantly. There may be things which are not. So I think that fundamentally you are, we do believe that there is basically a self-limiting thing in the size, a number of people who can access and participate in the digital economy, right? Digital economy because of
the language barrier.
Because of the language barrier. And so therefore, is it possible, right? And even those who don't have a language barrier, can we make the situation that the voice interface is actually superior? Like today, if I want to make a UPI payment, right, I will use the QR code or something. It's so easy. You do it. That's what you do. Can I make the experience better than that? Or can I, at least for some category of people, and can I expand the market of what people can do with things? So therefore, that's at least, I think that we're still in early stages here, but it's certainly something that I'm passionate about. So I just wanted to put it out there.
Fabulous. Last question to you, Vivek. You are an inspiration in many ways. You've sort of taken out a lot of time, dedicated it to the cause of the nation in many senses in terms of the architecture that you built. You're also somebody that has done a lot of entrepreneurial work yourself. You're a serial entrepreneur yourself. You're also an angel investor. So what is it that, what drives you, what motivates you? What is it that you want to tell, the startups of today, in terms of how they need to be thinking about things?
So, I think that, the way I see it is that, I didn't do it deliberately that I would do these. I would spend this much time working on these kinds of things. I started, I enjoyed it, and it's something that, and I felt that, in a small way, I was able to make a difference. So therefore I continued. So it's actually, it's very much a process. If somebody had told me 12, 13 years ago that this is what you'll do for the next 12 years, I would never have believed it, because that's not the thing. So therefore, I think, and there are opportunities for more and more people to do that kind of thing, right? To say, hey, this is, it's a different way. But I think that, I would say, rather than it's a privilege to have been able to do these things, not the other way around, that I claim that probably all these things would have happened anyway. It's just that a privilege that you have had the opportunity to do it rather than someone else. So therefore, I think that has to be recognized, that indeed is a privilege. But I think as an entrepreneur, I'm very bullish. I mean, I think that I look at when I was a student, in India, whatever, graduated my BTech 30 years ago. I think that when I compare that and I see the kids here today, I think I think the quality of entrepreneurs and the quality of thinking is much better. And I think that I'm actually, one of the very things that I do is I actually try to measure the amount of time I've spent with people under the age of 30 every week. Okay. And so because that is where I think you get the energy and the enthusiasm. So I don't know what to say to younger folks. You're doing the right thing. Keep doing it.
That's the end. Thank you so much. It has been an amazing, conversation. So really appreciate your time.